This is episode 5 of Making a Halo ODST cosplay.
Alright everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today's episode is going to be the final episode where we will assemble all the parts, rig, and then finish off with the weathering. Jumping straight into it, we are working on the forearms, so there are a few different components that are going to get glued in, and then also some parts are going to get screwed in. So for example, this is the kind of elbow protection piece. I'm adding a little layer of super glue in, and then I'm going to hit it with some accelerator, and then I'm going to place that down, and then once that's set, I'm going to come in from the other side with my screw and screwdriver, and I'm going to screw these pieces together. A few things to note when you're using screws on a 3D print: make sure you've got the correct length so that when you screw them in, they're not going to come through the other side, and also when you're screwing into 3D prints, bear in mind that they're hollow, so they will crack if you apply too much pressure. So make sure you're kind of slowly screwing it in rather than going in really fast, because it will probably crack your print. Now you may have noticed there are some extras glued onto the gauntlets. I forgot to record them, sorry. They're not too complicated though. They're like click fit kind of things. They fit into place, so you just glue it into wherever you see fit. Moving on to the shoulder pads, these ones are quite fun. So these come in a multiple part system. From the Brinks files are pretty cool. They've got lots of mounting points for attaching them to your shoulder. So we're going to start off by assembling this little like middle piece. I guess these are like the holding brackets. Again, I have just screwed these in. You can super glue them in or whatever you want to do. I think the screws add like an extra layer of security on there, which, you know, shoulder pads and the rest can get quite battered up when you're wearing as a cosplay. Next, I attach the bottom half of the shoulder pad, and again this has screws to help secure the piece in. I think I added some super glue as well, just to make sure it's locked in. To finish off the assembly of the 3D printed shoulder pad, you're just going to add the top half, again screwing it in, and making sure this time these screws are really shallow, so don't screw all the way through or get really short screws. Whatever you do, just make sure it's not going to push through to the other side. And this is the exciting part of the shoulders. I saw this method from the Brinks Instagram page. He had just bought 2 of these sports shoulder braces, and we're basically just going to screw them in using the hardware mounting points on the back of the shoulder to secure them to the fabric, and then you just strap them around your body, and yeah, it's pretty easy. It's a cool way of mounting it. Means it's not rigged to your shoulders, so you can move them more freely, and you've got more flexibility there. And they should stay in place as well. They shouldn't roll around your shoulders when you lift them up, because you can tighten it around your bicep. So that's pretty cool. I'm also just showing you here on screen that I've used these countersunk washers for the back. It basically just helps avoid the fabric ripping out over the top of the screw heads. So these are kind of like, they don't grip onto the fabric, but they're like hollow or concave. I don't know how to describe it, but they kind of grip the fabric, so the fabric's not going to rip out over the top of them under like most forces. I guess if you try your hardest, it will probably rip. But yeah, it just gives another layer of security. The bicep pieces are kind of an optional extra. Some people don't like them because they're kind of clumsy or fiddly or whatever, but I wanted to add them just to give my client the option of having them or not. So I am just adding some Velcro to like half of the back of this, and it's basically just going to Velcro onto the sports strap for the shoulder. Because it's a Velcro material, it will just stick right on. That might change depending on what sports strap you get. If it's not a Velcro material, then it obviously won't work, so you might have to do a different method. You could maybe just screw them in directly or glue them, whatever method works for you. Moving on, we've got some more assembly here, and this is kind of the mid-torso pouch thing. From the Brinks has made it a card holder, so you can either make it that or you can just glue it all together and it just be a solid thing. I'm going for the route of card holder, so you want to bear in mind of what you're gluing down. This also does get mounted to either fabric or foam, whatever you've made this kind of cutout of the base plate for. And here I'm showing you how I've done that. I've added some nylon webbing in between the foam and the screw layer, I guess, just to give the screw something to kind of sit on that's a bit more sturdy than the foam. If you screw all the way through the foam, it's gonna probably tear it and won't be as strong. And this also means we can include a piece of nylon that's going to go all the way up to the top of the main chest plate of the ODST, the iconic part of the ODST armor, and that will make this piece kind of a one torso piece, which makes it easier to kind of mount and handle and all that stuff. I'm next going to just screw down these little side accent pieces, again using screws to connect the front and back of them through the foam. These should be fine through the foam since they're not going to have that much like wear and tear on them. They just kind of sit there. Moving on to adding the connector from the mid-torso to the top of the chest. Again, from the Brinks files are so great because there's so many mounting points. So we're going to utilize those and put some nylon webbing from that mid-torso bit to the top of the chest plate and adding some screws into it. You could also glue it together if you wish. Again, process repeats. Moving on to how we're going to mount this front chest piece, I've added these 20mm clips. I like them because they're just easier to handle when you've got all your armor on. Means you have to fiddle around with a tiny little buckle. So again, just using the mounting points, I'm going to screw these in and make sure that the buckle is hidden behind the armor, otherwise you're going to see it exposed when wearing it, which you could go for that look if you wanted to, but I prefer hiding it. It just makes it look sleeker in my opinion. Now the backplate is one of the more complicated parts of this armor for the rigging. This is going to be almost a backpack which will hold the rest of the torso armor. It will have the waist straps and the shoulder straps as well. So starting off, I added the elastic bands here to the separate little segments just to make them one piece. This will just make it easier to add the rest of the pieces onto it at the end. Then going to move on and add the shoulder straps. It's important that we made these in a double layer system because we're going to sandwich 3D print in between them to give the maximum strength. If you haven't done that and you can't separate your parts, it's totally fine. Just glue them onto the top surface and it'll still look good. At the same time that I'm gluing these down, I want to make sure the nylon strap is fed through the holes. Now this is a 20mm strap to fit the shoulder strap that I've used, and the holes on the 3D print are slightly smaller, but you should be able to just fit them through if you fold it and push it through with something. It'll get through there. Once you've done that, you're going to want to glue it on the inside of the armor. I didn't get any footage of that, but just have enough length that it's going to be secure, and make sure you've got enough length on the front so that you can add your buckle, because this will attach to the front chest. So I'm going to use contact adhesive on all the surfaces that I want to stick together. You apply it in a thin layer and then you let it cure and then stick them together. They should be permanent. Next we're going to add the foam bits to this armor. So starting off with kind of like the six-pack looking thing, that's actually for your back plate. Again, I'm adding contact adhesive here and I'm going to wait for that to dry and then stick them together. Moving back up to the strap, we're going to add the 3D printed clip to the back of it and then add the male part of the buckle loosely on the end. And then we're going to go ahead and glue down the main part of the nylon webbing to the foam. Again, I'm just using CA glue and I'm going to use accelerator. This will leave a white crystally residue, however it's not really going to matter because it's going to be weathered. If you're going for a cleaner look, maybe don't use the activator. The super glue will just dry transparent. Yeah, just be aware of that. I'm going to be using this 10mm strap as the cross strap, but I'm measuring out with a bit of foam across to the neck piece to see where I want to cut the 20mm nylon webbing. So once I've done that, I'm just going to cut it with a pair of scissors, and that cut will be hidden by the 10mm webbing that's going to go across over the top of it. I did actually mess up a little bit on this part. I forgot to add the other side of the 3D printed buckle. So you're seeing here that I'm gluing it down to finalize that section. But you can see in the next clip, I've ripped that up and I've added the 3D printed buckle. So just make sure you do that before you glue it down. Otherwise you're gonna have to make a mess like I did and rip it up and glue it back down again. We're then just gonna add that 10mm cross strap, being sure that we're covering the end of that 20mm nylon webbing, and it's in line with the neck piece. I'm going to glue it bit by bit so that we're not getting any lifted parts. We want it to be quite snug to the form of the shoulder strap, and ultimately gluing it underneath so these seams are hidden. The little 3D printed buckle on the back will just be super glued down. This just ensures that they stay flat when you're running about. Next, I'm going to use 10mm nylon webbing through these holes, which will be threaded through the side plate armor. Make sure you have about 2 to 3 inches of that nylon webbing left on the inside, which you're just going to glue down, again with activator. This will just give it something solid to adhere to. I'm then going to add the foam inserts to this kind of waist area. Again, I'm using contact adhesive on half of it, and then I'm going to use contact adhesive again on the inside of the 3D print. Once those are spread and dried, you can then connect them, and then you can see how they're going to sit with the front part of the armor. Okay, so I'm going to explain this next part to the best of my abilities, but it's basically going to encompass adding buckles to the waist parts and the shoulder parts to create this full backpack system. On the waist bits, we're going to add the female and male buckles on either side, using super glue to kind of tab these down. I eventually go ahead and I sew these. I didn't get footage of sewing these together, but these are going to be high stress points, so you're going to want to just have more than glue. The glue will be fine to hold it in place, but just I would highly recommend sewing it together. This is the top section where I've added a little slit for nylon webbing to fit through there. I'm going to add a buckle to this nylon webbing, and that will complete the full system, which you can see here. Now unfortunately I didn't get the footage, my camera died. I was adding all the straps around different things, but I'm hoping that with a good look at what I've got here, you can kind of figure out what I've done. The waist part is fairly simple, it's almost just like a belt, and then I've added the vertical straps to the top of the waist strap. And to give you a better understanding of that, the part that I'm pointing at now has been looped around that top band and glued on the behind. It is currently free, you can move it side to side like this, but eventually I glue it onto the far side, right next to the foam. The extra nylon webbing on these buckles is used as the adjustable parts, so don't cut those off completely or glue them down. You will trim them to size, these are currently too long, but then once you trim them, fold over the end a couple times, and I sewed them together. You could probably glue them together. This just stops the webbing coming out of the buckle mechanism completely. I then went ahead and added these Velcro patches. These will then be used to anchor down the front torso kind of like ammo pouch area, which you can see here. I've added the Velcro parts onto the back of that foam plate. Here I'm just demonstrating how it all fits together. So the top buckles go into the top there, and then once those are in, you use the Velcro to secure those side plates, which will just keep everything nice and secure, stops any pieces flailing about, and it looks nice, neat and compact. Now that we've got the torso out the way, we can move on to the legs. So these are the thigh plates that sit on top of the thigh armor. We're going to be adding nylon webbing and D-rings to here so we can have some mounting points. To be able to clip these onto the belt, we're also going to add some buckles onto the inside. If you did glue down the straps like I did, you can just build them back up. It shouldn't be too difficult to get up. And you're just going to add a buckle about halfway up. This will mean that it's going to be balanced when it's clipped onto your belt. And to prevent that buckle from moving up or down, I'm going to glue it on either side, still allowing for the buckle to kind of rotate freely. I then just added a piece of nylon webbing across it just to add some extra security. The final part to these hip plates is to add the nylon webbing to the top side of the buckle, which we will later attach to the belt. For the tailbone armor, I'm also going to add some nylon webbing with some buckles so it can go onto the main belt. I did my best to kind of show you the stages I did here, kind of looped the D-ring into it, and then webbing goes over the top, and then back into the D-ring, and then back up to the top. And that just means that there's two pieces of nylon webbing at the end that you can attach your clips to, which can then be attached to the belt. With the front abdomen part, I'm going to glue the 3D printed part down to the foam backing. That foam backing has also been plasti dipped, so it should be super glue safe. If you're worried about the foam melting away, you can use foam safe glue and kicker. The next piece is the kind of lower abdomen part. and this is going to be connected to the part that we just made. The upper abdomen part has an orientation, so these vents should be facing up the way. Just make sure you're gluing it in the right way, otherwise you're going to have to undo some work and then redo it later. You can see here what the finished product looks like, and then also attached on the belt. The thigh armor has two small details to glue in, and these both have an orientation, so make sure you get them right way, and then just glue them in. The next step is to add the buckles, and I went ahead and made this custom strap for the thigh armor and then the thigh plates that sit on the top, so it all is in one kind of system. I have recorded the process of doing this, however it wasn't super clear, so I've left it out of this video, but if you guys are interested and want to see how it was made, I can maybe do a more detailed breakdown for you. But you can see in this video, this is the system that I kind of went for. Hopefully you can get a general idea of what it looks like and replicate it yourself. Moving back over to the armor, I'm then going to glue in this new strap that we've made. I'm using the detail on the inside of the thigh plate as a reference of where I want to glue it down. Once I'm happy with the placement, I will then secure that in with the glue and activate it. And then to give it one last layer of security, I'm going to add an extra nylon webbing strap across the whole top. And here's a demonstration of how this whole system works. I did reverse the video because for some reason I took everything apart rather than assembled it. So the main thigh armor connects to the 20mm clip, and then the thigh plate connects to the smaller 10mm clip just above it. This just keeps it as one complete system and makes it easier to handle. To finish off the rigging section of this video, we are going to add some foam padding into the thighs and forearms. These two parts will be friction fitted onto the wearer, so I'm just going in with some soundproofing foam as I like how soft it is and it gives a good grip on your clothing. Using my hot glue gun, I'm going to stick those into various places in the armor that I think will provide the most support. Here I'm just showing off what I've done with the forearm. I've added a loop of the soundproofing foam, and you can see when I put my arm in it, it's quite sturdy. I can shake it around and it won't move. With the rigging out the way, it's time to do the weathering, and this, in my opinion, is the best part of the whole process because you really see the final product come together. So to start with, if you have done the liquid latex weathering method, you're going to want to peel all of those bits off to reveal all of your weathering and chipped armor. I'm just using my fingers. I think it's soft enough that you can do that. If you find that uncomfortable, you can probably use a tongue depressor, like a wooden stick thing, and that should work too. The next step is to add your first layer of black wash. So using watered down black acrylic, I'm going to go over section by section and use a blue cloth to dry up most of it. What we're trying to achieve here is to create a very subtle texture. When you use the blue cloth to dry up most of the paint, it will leave behind a translucent layer, which you can stipple with the blue cloth to make it look uneven and almost like it's just been worn in battle. You can go as heavy or as light as you like with this method. It's really up to you, kind of artistic preference here. And you're going to want to focus the weathering into the kind of nooks and crannies, because that's where it would sit if it had been worn outside. Adding this black wash also dulls down the appearance of the paint. Obviously when we've just painted it on fresh, it's going to be nice and shiny and vibrant. The black will bring that tone down to a little bit more of a muted color. The final layer of weathering is where I like to add the dried mud. I mix together some orange, black, white, and a little bit of yellow to achieve this kind of light brown color. And this is to really use in those nooks and crannies, kind of painting them on where you think the mud would sit if you were, again, running through a battlefield. This can be applied with paintbrush or a sponge, and then I'll use a bit of paper towel to just kind of wipe down the excess. And if you do it in a certain motion, it'll look like it's got little jagged lines and you'll kind of avoid the brushstroke look. You can repeat this process over all the parts of the armor that you wish. I'm not going to show you every single piece because it is basically the same process. The only place that this process will differ is on the foam parts. I tend to avoid doing the black wash over the black piece of the foam. I'll just use the kind of lighter brown mud to highlight the edges and maybe in some of the crevices. Now this is a fun little technique I just learned from a fellow creator, and it's basically called blocking. So you'll add the color of paint that you wish onto two pieces of wood. So I'm just using these tongue depressors. You're going to spread it out into kind of a thin layer, but have enough that it can be wiped off. And then you're going to use it basically as like an edge highlight or a scuff tool. So you can, go across the edges and it'll add a very thin layer of the paint, almost looking like you've scuffed it. And then you can also do it across the flatter surfaces to give it more of like a paint splotch look. I've recorded the 3 stages on the shoulder pads just to show you the difference it makes. So this is just the clean, no wash, this is with wash, and then finally with the wash and the mud. To add the name tag to the chest plate, I 3D modeled and printed off this little template, which I have then masked off the surrounding area, and I'm going to use this to airbrush in the text. And with that done, that is the armor complete. This has been an awesome project, learning about how to make an ODST, and I'm so glad that you guys have come along with me. I hope you've enjoyed it. You can see here that I'm doing the full kind of try on test fit just to make sure it's all good. Everything moves and fits great. The adjustable straps are awesome, they make everything fit perfectly, and obviously this is going to a client overseas, so it will allow them to get a better fit for themselves. As I put on the helmet here, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who stuck around. Again, you have been awesome. I've loved reading your comments, and I hope you enjoyed this build series. I'm going to leave this video off with me doing a full turn out of the armor, and yeah, until next time, stay safe out there, Spartans.